Okay, made some decisions here, some choices. I retaped the sides of the stem the same method as before, only this time it's a 1/8 inch wide tape, which is 0.125. So it's strictly a guideline. If you were to thin the bite zone to that depth, all flat all the way across, you'd cut into the airway. The only way you can use this sort of tape is to make sure you keep things rounded down on this end, because you need more thickness than the tape will allow you. So I've also used some of this stuff you hear me talk about all the time, the hockey tape, both to keep the masking tape in place and as a protection. And if you're wondering why I'm protecting the shank after having blasted it with a 3M bristle brush and all that kind of stuff, it's mostly for gouges. We had to put something on this tape to keep it in place. Why not use something that will protect as well as hold the masking tape there in case you slip and take a chunk out? This stuff is super tough. It's like wearing seat belts. And I marked out where the slot is just for comfort's sake. So I think the next bit of business here is to take off the plane will make a triangular slice. If you could do it with a laser, you would end up with something that's a triangle that's that wide at the bottom and a point at the other end. We're going to do that on both sides, and then again on the bottom. This will be a narrower triangle. And this flat on the bottom, all these shells and tan shells had a flat portion for the stamping. If you were to do this on like a root or a Briere Dunhill, they are laid out differently. So the stamping's put in a different place, and usually the shank is a different shape by a little bit. But in this case, we have to deal with that. So I'm going to go use the belt grinder once again. And once we're done with that, then the true fun begins. And those of you who might be making a stem like this along with the video just for fun, we'll get into the good stuff at that point in terms of difficulty factor. Right now we're just roughing things in. So that's it. I will go do a little more grinding, be back in just a second. Okay, it's starting to look sort of like a stem. I've got a plane going on each of the 5, a facet, a plane, whatever you choose to call it. When you're making a geometric stem, they're like diamonds, the way gemstones are cut with flats. And what's supposed to be flat better be flat. And what's supposed to be gently rounded better be gently rounded, and evenly so, or they look terrible. And that's the ugly truth of them, so to speak. Now, in the course of doing this last round at the grinder up here, it occurred to me to tell you guys that the most important single piece of information that I could give somebody who wants to make stems, as opposed to cleaning and restoring pipes, is one thing. Making whole stems from rod stock is quite a different animal. And if there's one thing with regard to equipment that I would suggest is the most important, is if you use any kind of shaping device that is a motor, whether it's a belt sander, a slack belt sander, a knife grinder, a bench grinder, whatever it is, equip it with a VFD, a variable frequency drive, and it will allow you to accommodate both your skill level and your task. Meaning if it's a very delicate task, you can turn the speed down to where it's just crawling and be shockingly, amazingly precise. And if you want to hog material away with abandon, crank it up and go to town. And if you're feeling a little off one day, you back it up. If you're feeling sharp, you crank it. And as you get better, you'll find that you're doing things faster and faster without making many mistakes. So there you go. A VFD is actually a computer, a small box that drives electric motors. Now the catch is, there's always a catch. They only work when you're with two-phase current in your shop or your house. Just ordinary household current will drive a VFD. But the motor that it's attached to has to be a three-phase motor, industrial, like a 240 or 480 volt motor. And they can be had at very little cost in surplus yards and junkyards and stuff like that. But don't go run out and buy a VFD thinking you can hook it up to your two-phase buffer or grinder or sander that you have today. Unless you put a three-phase motor in your shop first, don't go near a VFD. But if you decide to do it, you will thank me for the rest of your days. Guaranteed. It's that big of a deal. All right, so enough of all that. Looks like it's time to get the button squared away here. And that is the province of one of these files that's smooth on the flats and rough on the edges, and also just grind this thing away. And once we get the stem totally roughed in, then the fun begins, as I said before. Now the width of the funnel will shrink when I push this plane, the end of this, back a little bit to cut that shorter. I left the handle on, remember? That's not a big deal. You just get the same tool out that you originally made it with and open it as much as you like. It only takes a few seconds. So it's better to do it twice, do it a second time, than to deliberately make it too wide in the first place, hoping that you'll hit a bullseye widthwise when you reduce the length of the stem. That's too risky of a way to go. So I do it this way. I make it the proper width, shrink it, shorten it, and then open the V up a little bit again. So we're looking good. That's it for now. I'm going to splice together some of these little tape pieces and configure them so that they're watchable in short segments. And I will see you in a bit.